Dear listeners of the Female Guides Requested podcast, happy Wednesday. This is your host Ting Ting from Las Vegas. Today our guest is Jessica Baker. Former World Tour Freeskiing champion, professional mountain guide, and mother, Jessica Baker has a knack for seeking out remote adventures. From a young age, Jessica developed a love for wild and mountainous landscapes while growing up on a small farm in North Idaho. From the Arctic to the southernmost Andes, Jessica has spanned the globe with her ski and alpine endeavors and broken the ceiling for women in the mountain guiding profession. Jessica lives in Jackson, Wyoming with her husband, a fellow mountain guide, and her 2 young daughters. I had so much fun chatting with Jessica. Her passion for mountain and guiding reinforced my belief in adventures and why guides love sharing these experiences. Her commitment to give back to the community and desire to break barriers for people to access the sport of skiing was inspiring. I also admire her energy. She sustains a busy guiding schedule, mentors students, plans big trips and film projects, and raises 2 kids. She really made me want to ski again. I can't wait for you to listen to Jessica's amazing life story as well. So Jessica, welcome to the Female Guides Requested podcast. I'm so happy to have you. You're such a big name. You have huge followership, but that's not why I'm scared because you're so nice. What I'm scared of is you are a skier, and I'm a climber, so I might ask you dumb questions. So I'm gonna take a shortcut. First, I'll let you use your words to introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I am recently a very big fan of your podcast. On my way back from Vegas, climbing in Red Rock, I had all this time and I listened to like most of your podcasts and had such a nice time listening to them. So great work. Your subject matter and the people you have on the show are amazing. Your guests are amazing, and good friends of mine. But my name is Jessica Baker. I am a professional skier, a professional mountain guide. I currently live in Jackson, Wyoming. I've been here for a while with my husband, and I have 2 daughters. They're 7 and 11 currently.
7 and 11, okay.
Yeah. Almost 8, but yeah, 7 and 11. And I have been pursuing activities in the mountains for a very long time, like all my life. So a big part of my life.
Yeah, and that's interesting because so for a lot of people, they always think that it's hard for women to do this profession for a very long time. So let me ask you, so how early did you start?
So, I mean, personally, I grew up in the mountains, so my parents really introduced me to like camping and mountains very early on in my life. Like it was part of my system, but it never left my system. Like it was really part of my ethos growing up. It was like where I felt comfortable and good. And my parents gave me the gift of skiing very early on. I didn't get to climb until I was a little older, but college is really where I got to climb. But coming out of college, I realized I really need to be in the mountains and in nature. And I moved to Jackson, Wyoming in 1999. And I actually used my undergrad degree as a geologist. I worked as a hydrologist for the Bridger Teton National Forest in Jackson, Wyoming, which is like all the national forests surrounding Grand Teton National Park up in towards Yellowstone, a very large swath of land, like 3.7 million acres. And I got to really explore the region through that job. And I was also at the same time skiing professionally. I was like on the big mountain free skiing circuit, the Freeskiing World Tour and kind of expanding my range in the mountains, like getting in some very big, difficult descents. And in college, I had this opportunity to take a year abroad in New Zealand. And during that time, I really like upped my alpine climbing game and continued to climb. And so by the time I got to Jackson, Wyoming, I had a pretty robust personal resume. And even though I was working for the Forest Service as this hydrologist, I was quickly befriending guides and professionals in the mountains, climbers, alpinists, who were like, have you ever considered guiding? And because I was sort of deep in my skiing career, I didn't like jump into it right away. But in 2004 is when I really started to cut my teeth at guiding, and it started in the ski discipline. In 2004, two things happened. Doug and Emily Coombs invited me to Le Grave, France, to experience their big mountain skiing camps and their steep skiing camps. So I joined them kind of as a guest and tail guide for their camps that year. And then I also got invited to Alaska to kind of audit and take a look at the heli skiing world. So I came into that system mostly just as like, a newbie, and lived in a tent that year in Alaska, but kind of started to cut my teeth at the very early stages of guiding and like started into that role. 2005, I did my knee in. I tore my ACL, MCL, medial and lateral meniscus in a free skiing competition in Kirkwood, California.
Ooh.
And so it kind of put everything on hold. It was like a 9-month recovery. Kind of had to put all my mountain pursuits on hold. And then 2006, I kind of popped back into things. And that was also the year that I got hired on officially by Exa Mountain Guides. So things started really shifting around then. And really, I have been like kind of full-time guiding since 2007.
Okay. You were talking about free skiing. So that's like, I don't understand that. I mean, just like a lot of people say, what's free climbing and free soloing? I have to explain, but.
Yes. So, and it's sort of morphed, like in the early stages, it was called big mountain free skiing competitions. And now they've just turned it into free skiing competitions. And essentially the gist of it is you get plopped on top of a mountain, or you hike up there, or you get put there by a helicopter. You have a huge face, a massive venue, anywhere from like 2,000 vertical feet long to 4,000 vertical feet long, or slightly more. And your job is to ski down, and you're judged on the following criteria. You're judged on your fluidity, your speed, your difficulty of line. Fluidity, speed, difficulty of line, your style. So those were the things.
Okay.
Style.
And it's like backcountry setting, right? So it's not resort setting.
It's either like full backcountry or like a more remote area accessed by like a cat or a helicopter, or it's like a closed area within a resort that's like permanently closed that they actually open up for these competitions. So, for example, like Kirkwood, where I ended up getting injured, they have like this central venue, like right in the heart of the resort, that's like really steep and gnarly, and it's just like permanently closed. And then they open it up for the competition. And then like the Alaska competitions, you get plopped up there by a helicopter. There's a venue like in Red Mountain in Canada that you have to kind of like, it's like a 20 or 30-minute hike to get up to the top of the venue. So it just depends, but usually it is either part of a resort, but kind of generally a closed area, or like a more remote venue.
And you said that they judge you. I mean, speed, I kind of can understand. The line of difficulty is so everybody get to choose their line skiing down.
Yeah, it's very fluid. There's a lot of choice. You start to learn like what the judges like, but you know, what they reward is like if let's say you enter into a really tight chute to begin with, and at the end of it, it's like a 30-foot cliff. You jump the cliff, then you ski out really smooth, and then you see another cliff that's like in line with what you're doing. Maybe you throw a trick off of that one. You continue down, like hopefully you're very fluid and moving fast during all of this. Maybe you take a smaller, and then you see like a straight line, and you go through the straight line. Maybe you see one more like rock you can like do a trick off of at the end, and then you cruise into the finish. But this is just like a, theoretical play by play.
And did you get to have the information of the mountains, or did you get to scout the mountain or something like that?
Right. It was very much like most of the time you had to assess the venue from either looking from below or with photos, because if you went into the venue, you would generally ruin the snow in the venue. So they were trying to keep it fresh enough that you could jump the cliffs and it wasn't already skied out. Although some competitions it was already skied out. It depended on where we were. But yeah, so it was a game of memorization, which, to be honest, is a big piece of mountain guiding. Like I look over at a piece of terrain I'm going to head towards, like a ridge line up in the alpine or something. And part of me needs to kind of take it in and almost memorize like the general direction and the general flow of the day before I head into the micro terrain I'm going to be, working with on a more intimate level in the moment, in addition to maps, right? So that skill definitely crossed over to guiding. And also like a lot of the terrain, like extreme ski mountaineering terrain that I've gotten into and still get into at times, you have to look from the bottom or from some vantage point. You often can't go just ski to the underneath it and check it out. Like you have to kind of memorize the terrain and then go access it from above. And then when you're above, it's generally kind of blind to you. So you're hoping that like the mental map you made is still there.
Wow, it definitely takes a lot of skills. Yeah, trying to flash the day. Yeah, I try to, when you describe, just trying to imagine what's in the climbing settings. I can understand a bit better. So you say that they judge you with this thing and also, I forgot the style and everything. So how do they watch you? Did there's some film thing that follow you, or I don't know.
In the more modern, I retired from the whole circuit in 2009, or that was my last competition was in 2009. But nowadays, yeah, they have like a drone following each person, sometimes helicopters. During my time, they had a combination of like binoculars. They had camera people in the venue at different spots, but they were only capturing like, more micro or like specific areas of the venue. And then some of the competitions would have a helicopter and it would just like follow you with a camera and they could watch that as you came down. But often it was like the judges were kind of set up central right at the base of the venue where they could see the whole venue. And then they would use binoculars to watch you come down.
It's another world to me, but it's quite interesting. And I read a little bit of your bio. It said that you start skiing at 5, and then you did some ski racing. So how did you move into the freestyle?
Yeah, so I spent a long time ski racing. Took it to a pretty high level. Ski race through college for like an NCAA Division I team, and it was so serious, and it was so many years of competition. I was just burned out. I was like ready to be done with that kind of skiing. It's so regimented, right? You're like skiing around gates and you have to slip the courses and you have to be there at a specific time. You have to stay warm. And it's just like a lot of pressure. And so I was like, I am done. I am just free skiing now. And it was when I moved to Jackson that someone was like, "Ooh, you'd be a good candidate for these free skiing competitions." So at first I was like, "Oh no, I have no interest. Like I don't even know what that is." And also I've been competing for so long. I don't know if I want to do that. And then it it was like it like kind of bore through my brain a little bit, and I was like, maybe I should try it. And then I did try it and I won, and I was like, oh, maybe I should do another one. And then I won, and I was like, okay, maybe I should stay with this. So then I stayed on the tour for like 9 years, but that was sort of the progression of it.
I see. And then other than you won, you must enjoy to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's amazing to win and it feels good to do that. But the best part about it was I was surrounded by these like amazing athletes. We were skiing all over the world. I mean, we had competitions in France and Switzerland, and we were in Canada, and we were in South America. We were Alaska. I mean, some years that there was a Russian competition. I never got to go to that one, but we were traveling all over the world, all these amazing athletes. We really started to like bond and have a community around it. So that was a big piece of it. And there was something about that level of competition that inevitably it made you a much better skier all said and done. It was just very challenging and rewarding, and hard to mimic that kind of growth in just normal skiing. Like it was just the environment lent to a lot of growth. That or you got hurt, but like when you were on your game and when you were improving, it was like a very elevated level of growth.
So it's like, yes, of course you need to ski very well, but there's a lot of other factors you have to consider as this a combined challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's ultimately it was just as nerve-wracking, if not more nerve-wracking than ski racing. And when I started to get that feeling that had previously had in ski racing, where I was like, I'm no longer motivated for myself, and I'm more worried about my competition, and I'm worried about getting hurt. That's when I was like, I think I'm done. I think this is good. I think I've done enough. But some amazing years. Some of the best years of my life were on that tour and during that time.
Wow. And what brought you to Jackson then? Was that the gee, I don't even remember.
Hydrologist, yeah, which is simply the study of water. So I went to Bates College back east in Maine. I didn't grow up in on the East Coast. I grew up in North Idaho, up in the panhandle of Idaho, near the Canadian border, actually. And went back east to school. I was studying geology. I had sort of discovered geology, and when I was there, and I think this is still the case for the Bates Geology Department, they make you do a thesis, pretty much the same as like a master's thesis. And usually it's like a 2-year process. And I ended up getting this grant to do the work that I was doing for my thesis. It was actually like on climate change, but that's a different story. But I got this grant, worked really hard all summer long on it. And I had pretty much finished my work, and I still had like 3 more weeks left of my summer and a little bit of cash because I had this grant. And I was like, I'm going to go somewhere like different. I was like, I'm going to go on a road trip out west. I'm going to go say hi to my family, and I'm just going to get a taste of the West again. I missed the West. So I did this like big road trip. I invited a friend of mine from New Zealand who happened to be there for the summer. And we did this big like circle of like, Utah and the desert. And anyway, Jackson Hole was on the list, and we popped in, and I remember like driving over Teton Pass and seeing the beautiful valley below and the town and sort of the buttes, and the Snake River like kind of like glistening down in the valley. And then we dropped into the valley, and then we looked north, and I saw like the Grand Teton, and I was just like instantly captivated. I was like, wow, this place is amazing. And so I just like I only had like 3 or 4 days in Jackson, but I left feeling like I needed to come back. And so I was sort of in the back of my head thinking like, how do I get to Jackson Hole? Like what are the steps to get there? and I saw this position, this like hydrology position, and also Jackson Hole Mountain Resort had an advertisement for like they needed ski instructors, and I had a background in ski instruction. Also, I had gotten like my PSA, which is the Professional Ski Instructors of America Association. I had gotten like my first level of certification with them, so I had some ski racing background. I had an instructing background. I had a hydrology background, and it all kind of came together. Like I saw the job opportunities and I jumped on it. So that's how I ended up in Jackson. And I pretty much left college and went straight to Jackson, Wyoming.
Yeah. And you say that you mentioned New Zealand trip in that, and then you learned climbing, alpine climbing.
Yes. So college was like my first real opportunity to cut my teeth at climbing. North Idaho doesn't have a lot of climbing. It has a little bit. But my parents weren't climbers, and we didn't have the resources for climbing gear or anything. It was just like not an option. And it was college where I had the opportunity. And so I started climbing with some amazing climbers like back east on like the really impressive granite that is in New England, both Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont. And my junior year, I had an opportunity to go abroad. So I ended up going to the University of Otago in New Zealand, out of Dunedin, New Zealand, on the South Island. And when I got there, I went from summer, essentially. My semester started in the summer. And
you mean their summer?
No, it was my summer in America, and it was their winter. So I got there and it was like winter. I was like, oh, this place is so cold, and I wasn't ready for it. But then there was like this guy, I remember he was like, hey, have you signed up to be part of our alpine club? And I was like, no, what's that? And he's like, oh, we do all sorts of adventures, whether it's spring, summer, fall, winter. We just go out and we do the thing. And I'm like, that sounds cool. So I signed up, and it was like this rad community of university students doing alpine adventures, anything from just like hiking up to a hut and hanging out in a hut to like full like a sense of Mount Aoraki and like big glacial technical objectives. And so I just started doing more of them and really started cutting my teeth at like glaciated alpine terrain, and I oddly liked it. Like, who loves that stuff? But I liked it, and I just loved the complexity and how beautiful and striking the environment was. Obviously, it felt very dangerous, but like I loved it, and so that was sort of like the first alpine foray. And at the same time, I got to continue to climb in New Zealand, and sort of realized like, oh, the combination of climbing and this alpine climbing plus my skiing, I could do anything. I could like go anywhere with those skills, and literally I could like climb some gnarly route and ski down,
I know, that was like so fast, not like walk down. And it was so much more fun too. And that was my reason that I picked up skiing, but it didn't end up that well.
It's not too late. We are going. I have this feeling we are going to get you skiing. I can't wait.
Yeah, I can climb. Yeah, but the skiing is very scary to me. It's not that I didn't try, but of course, I mean, you for you it's very easy. I mean, I grew up in the country. There's no snow, and so the first time I saw snow in the States, I was so excited. And just I need to learn the thing. But for me, I always have this thing say that, if you didn't start skiing very young, then you can't get really good. Is that true, not true, or from your teaching experience?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I actually have taught many adults to ski. I won't deny it. Like, it's sort of similar to climbing, to be honest. Like, you have to spend a lot of time practicing to kind of up the next level. So like if you're climbing 5'6" and you really want to be leading at 5'7", you got to climb a lot of 5'6" before you can start leading 5'7" and onward, 5'10". If I'm at the 5'10" level, if I want to be climbing consistently at 5'11", I have to stack a bunch of 5'10s in the mix before I can get to 5'11". And that's the same thing with skiing. Like you know, you're refining all these movements at each stage as you learn to ski, and it takes time and practice. So just sort of like surfing too. I'm a horrible surfer. I'm really a beginner surfer, let me face it. And I keep trying, but I don't have enough time to like immerse myself in it. So I won't deny it. Like immersion helps a ton, and the more practice you can get, the better. But it is 100% like people can do it at any age, but you have to have a little time to dedicate to it. So I would say if you've dabbled in it and you've had like a little bit of time to play with it, you're probably still in that like I'm vulnerable and scared stage, but the more you do it, the less of that feeling you'll have. And once you start to realize you have control, which is like my job as a teacher, like a technician, is to teach you the skills that you need to make the movements you need. You can catch on pretty quick, actually. I think maybe faster than climbing at times, because climbing, it's like if you don't have strong forearms and you don't have really clean technique, you just can't get up it. Whereas skiing, you can kind of have a range of technique to get down something safely, and then you keep working to make it cleaner and cleaner. So I'm not talking about like something steep. I'm literally talking about like beginner and intermediate terrain, just getting comfortable in your technique on those runs until you're like, oh yeah, I'm no longer scared, and actually I have full control and I'm okay. And then you start adding more pieces of the technical puzzle. I see trepidation and or a little concern on your face.
No, I mean I understand though, because I see people's fear when I teach them climbing, right?
Yes.
And then I know that it's just a journey of I help them to build their confidence. And then you're talking about like learning to gain control. Maybe that's a similar way, right? The more exposed to it, the more comfortable you are, the more confidence you are, then you just move better.
That is true. But then I also, and I think you probably do this in your climbing guiding, it's like I'm also teaching people to move better. I'm like, hey, you need to get your weight over your foot a little bit more here. Ooh, you need a little more edge in this moment in the turn. And you just start building on those techniques, and at some point it starts to click, and it's like, oh, ooh, look at me. I'm like parallel turning now, and and climbing, I think, can be similar, but I feel like climbing, it's like, okay, it's vertical, right? Like you're going up. So there's an element of like, I need to be able to be strong enough to just climb straight up. But fear is always a barrier, right? That will always make it hard. So the more we can eliminate the fear or reduce it, the more we gain in the progression.
Yeah. And I will ask you about those like camp that you teach, because I know that you host a lot of women's ski camp. But I want to finish this journey. That how so you stay in Jackson for a while with your the more like the in quote real job, and then you obviously hang out with some ski climbing friends, and you at some point somebody asked you whether you want to be a guide.
Yeah, it was like,
how do you know what prompted them to do so, or are they guys?
Yeah, so one of the people that asked me about it was Doug Coombs, and he had recently gotten his IFMGA full cert, and he was like, "You seem like somebody that could do this." And I had skied with him in Le Grave, and he saw my skill sets on skis, and he saw that I liked the big mountain kind of alpine skiing, and so I think he just saw the potential, and he also knew that I was sort of doing all the other things also. I think what I remember is it was him and Mark Newcomb, and they were both like, keep building your personal resume. Like, work towards being a guide, but like keep building these bigger objectives in your cache. Like, keep building up what you're doing on your own time. And I kind of took that to heart. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this next thing. And I just had like goals and kept climbing and skiing bigger things. And then I I actually can't remember the exact like mode that I did this in. I can't remember if I like handed in a resume or just went and talked to the owners of X Mountain Guides. But ultimately, like, this is a couple steps in the process because I had already guided a little bit in Alaska. But when I went to Exum, which I knew was like the premier guide service, I'm like, oh, I'm like way underqualified for this. But I knew I had potential. And uh, they were like, yeah, you have stacked up some nice things. Like, you have done some good things. They're like, why don't you come audit for a season? And this is 2006. Come audit. Let's see what your potential is. And they kind of invited me in. And with Exum, that's how people get hired on with Exum. It's an invitation from another guide, which does seem like a little bit of gatekeeping, but it's not so much like, we're only letting certain types of people come in. It's like, it's have you spent time with this person? How do they react in the mountains? Do you recommend this person because you've seen how they work in the mountains? And that's what it takes. So somebody vouched for me, whether it was Doug Coombs or someone else. And then I started auditing, and they were like, oh, she's doing pretty well. And they just sort of like took me in under their wing. And there was a ton of mentorship at Exum, especially when I first went in. A lot of the like original lead guides, chief guides were still there. They were passing on a lot of like kind of like historical context for what we were doing. And there was just a huge connection to Teton mountaineering. And that was sort of how the Exum side of things happened. And the Alaska thing was just actually probably what kicked things off between Doug Coombs and LaGrave and the Alaska heli skiing. That was Theo Miners. He was the owner of Alaska Rendezvous Guides, a mile 45.5 out of Valdez, so up on Thompson Pass, just beyond Valdez Heli Ski Guides. And Theo worked with me at Jackson Hole as an instructor and PSA examiner. And he had seen me. I ended up getting my PSA certification pretty quickly when I moved to Jackson. So I ended up getting like my level 3 alpine certification within the first 2 years of being in Jackson. And Theo saw me, and then I ended up going for the examiner position as well, which is essentially like the IT members at AMGA. It's that in the ski instructing side of things. And he was like, you should come check things out in Alaska. He's like, if you think this is big mountain skiing, come check out Alaska. So that invite was sort of kicked me into gear in the Alaska side of things. And when I went to Alaska, even though I had been skiing in LaGrave that same year, which is big mountains too, Alaska was like the next scale. I mean, it's like these mountains are coming out of the sea, but there's like 8,000, 9,000 feet of relief. I mean, these are huge mountains, or more. Obviously, Denali is even bigger, but big scale mountains. And it made me realize, oh, the Tetons are like a great training ground, but they're kind of mini compared to some of this other stuff. But mini and mighty, like Tetons, amazing training ground, absolutely stunning mountain range. Some of the best ski mountaineering in the world are in the Tetons. But during that time, like my global view of the scale of mountains changed.
I see. So, back to Jackson, instead of the water research, that you actually also teach skiing. So that's right. I forgot about that. So you teach skiing, and they were just like, hey, guiding is not too far. Well, I should not say that, but it's still you work in the same classroom, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah, they were like, they saw the potential in me. They saw I was determined. They saw I was strong. They saw that I could endure a lot of like exposure. And I think they just were like, you should maybe take a run at this or see what you think of it. And yeah, it was sort of a slow burn. And at the same time, I was told, continue to build your personal resume, like keep ticking off bigger climbs, bigger ski mountaineering runs, etc.
And then you say that you full-time guide, 2007, is that?
That's when I quit my job as a hydrologist.
I see. Yeah.
I quit my job as a hydrologist, even though it was a cool job. Like I, did a lot of field work in the summer and wrote a lot of really amazing papers and got to interact with government and tried to make some policy change, which was incredibly slow because it was the government, but it was like rewarding work. But I could feel the pull for something like where I had a little more autonomy, where I had a little more power over my outcome, where I wasn't waiting for like 5 other departments to say yes or no about writing some paper.
Right.
It just sort of like, I was like, I think I'm done with hydrology and now I want to be a guide. Now, some people were like, are you nuts? Like, you already have a professional job. What are you thinking? Like, now you want to be a mountain guide? Like, is that even a profession? But, I love working physically. I love the intensity of the decision making, the incredibly complex puzzle that I have to put together in order to provide a safe, not like risk-free, but a safe, empowering, inspiring, physically demanding experience in the mountains for somebody and bring them home safe at the end of the day. Like that is an incredibly difficult task. And I love the complexity of that and the challenge of that.
When you commit to guiding full time, at that time you haven't done your last comp, so you were still doing comp here and there, right?
Mm-hmm. I was still, it was like towards the end of it, but like I think I want to say in 2008, I did really well in like the World Tour Freeskiing competition that year. But I could just feel, like I was telling you earlier, I could feel that like I was getting anxiety going to the start gate. I was starting to wonder who am I doing this for? Like I had sponsors. I was definitely beholden to a certain level because of it. And then I realized, who am I doing this for? So while I was sort of tailing off my free skiing competition side of things, that's when I moved into the guiding. And the guiding in the winter in the Tetons during that time was pretty minimal. Like there were only a couple guides guiding skiing in the backcountry during that time, which is hard to believe because the skiing in the Tetons is world class. But it really hadn't become like a commercialized thing yet. Like the climbing was, because that was, the Tetons are the birthplace of North American mountaineering. Like that was the first guide service, but it was all like summer related, like summer alpine climbing. So the ski guiding really hadn't like fully caught on. There were a few guides doing it, but not many. So I was still free to kind of do other things in the winter. So I was still instructing and I was doing some of these competitions, and I was doing some filming and photo shoots and stories and doing various travel around that. But I think as I moved towards the guiding, I realized like, oh, this is going to be like a sort of a different mindset. And I was ready to be done with the competitions.
So you said back then that the ski guiding in Teton Valley is still not. I always thought that like Teton Valley is such a huge skiing destination, but then there's not a whole lot of guiding.
Well, at the time there was. So I'm kind of speaking to like 2006, 2007.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So at that time, there was some guiding going on. There was high mountain heli skiing. They were doing some heli skiing on the Snake River Range. There were the Jackson Hole Resort Alpine guides, which did the backcountry off essentially the gates, out of the gates, mechanized skiing. So you would like take the tram up and go out the gates of the resort and ski the backcountry, which is in Jackson, quite amazing backcountry. And so there was a guiding service there, but the Grand Teton National Park guided backcountry skiing really wasn't a major thing yet. It was like people were personally going and there were plenty of ski mountaineers. I mean, like Bill Briggs skied the Grand Teton, in the 70s? I'll have to look that up, which year. I should have that memorized. But, so big things were happening on skis in the Tetons, but the actual guiding was minimal in the winter for that kind of backcountry ski mountaineering guiding. So when I first got into it, really, if I wanted a job with Exum, it was primarily a summer thing, like alpine climbing, guiding, and but it came along. The pickup in guided backcountry skiing in Grand Teton National Park picked up as I progressed through the ranks at Exum.
I see. So now, at current stage, is it a sustainable winter?
So at this stage in my career, I work for a lot of different companies, including my own company. So to really bring it together, where I fill my schedule entirely, I do a combination of guiding for Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, and I still actually work for them as an instructor. I help train their staff in the beginning of the year. I do exams for PSA. I have some private clients who still like to be inbounds at the resort, but I do a mix of guiding for Jackson Hole Mountain Resort, guiding for Exum Mountain Guides in the Tetons, and then I have intermingled camps and trips that I run through Ski Divas LLC, which is my business, which started as ski camps for women, but as I progressed in my guiding, it became much more than that.
So do you still do the heli ski guiding in Alaska?
I do. I took there was sort of a combination of things. I had children. So the first time I was pregnant was in 2013. And so I took a year off of heli ski guiding there. And then the following year I did end up with a baby, going up to Alaska and heli ski guiding with a baby. That's another story. And yeah, it really is. And then in 2017, I was pregnant and had my baby in March of 2017. So I did not heli ski guide that year. And then when COVID hit, I guess, what was it? 2020 is when it really shut things down, and things got shut down right during the heli ski season. So I didn't go heli ski guiding that season. So there have been about 3, and 1 year I was injured way back in the day in 2005. So there have been 4 years where I have not been part of the heli ski scene, but I have been going up for a long time. So most seasons, and I am going back this season as well. I've been sort of a story around Alaska Rendezvous Guides in itself, but Theo Miners passed away in 2012 in an accident, not in the mountains. And then his company was handed over to his children, but long story short, between him dying suddenly and there wasn't much organization for his children to really fully pick up the business and run with it. They did their best, but ultimately it was sold off and has changed and it's no longer there. So the past 3 years, I've been working for a company out of Haines that has been amazing, because Haines, Alaska is a little further south. It's in the Coast Range. It's near Glacier Bay National Park and Mount Fairweather. It's some of the craziest skiing I've ever witnessed and done in my life. It's the place that's known for its 50, 60 degree spine lines that somehow form snow on these just crazy ribs. And a lot of film crews go there to film their ski films. Most Alaska segments are actually filmed in Haines, out of Haines. I've been working for them for the last 3 years, but I think this coming season I'll be back up in the Valdez region, which is where I have a lot of experience, 18 years. So.
Yeah, so I have 2 major questions here. One is Ski Divas, and let's hold on to that. And okay. The second thing is So, as a guy, because, different areas have different seasons, and then usually one company is not going to supply for all the money that we need for the whole year. So we always have to kind of like string together different work from different places. And then a lot of time you have to travel. And the scheduling itself is a huge task on that. And then on top of that, you have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old during all these years. And for me, it's like an impossible task. Can you share some experience in that? I mean, my husband right now is away and I have to take care of 2 cats. And then I'm like overwhelmed. So it's like hard to imagine. It's like 2 kids with a job that you are responsible for other people's safety, and you have to. It's a complex job, and then you need to have also still need to have all these energies to deal with the family stuff.
Yeah, so it's a common question I get, and I because I am probably an exception, or there aren't many of us. There are not many of us that are full-time mountain guides and mothers. Then there's a reason. It is incredibly difficult. Like first and foremost, I'm able to do it because my partner is extremely supportive. My husband is also a mountain guide, fully certified mountain guide. But he has recognized, like, okay, you've already been on this path. Like, you have excelled in your career. You have an amazing set of clientele. Like, you should keep doing many of these things. And so it's very, very supportive. Without his support, there's no way I could do it. He takes on the kids months at a time. I try not to be gone longer than like 6 weeks at a time. That's like really long when I'm gone for that long. And I miss out on my children's lives. Like I come back and I'm like, oh, you've changed. I don't like this. Like this is too much. So it can be heartbreaking to leave for that long, but that is how I do it. My partner. And then we rely sometimes on grandparents, like my parents and his parents. Both his mom and his stepdad are alive, and my mom and dad are alive. And so they come in every once in a while and kind of like take the kids for a week here and there and help out. So that is part of the support. We have supportive neighbors who can like pick up the kids. Like say I'm just guiding in the Tetons and so is my husband. Like, oh, well, I'm not going to make it back by 4 p.m. and we have to pick up the kids. So and sometimes that happens, right? Guiding, you're like, oh, my time plan's off a little bit, or we're moving slow and I can't go any faster. And yeah, we have to, lean on other people, community members. So that's part of it. It's just like other people help where we can get the help. And then it's an incredibly complex planning process. Like it's like, okay, I have a potential trip here and here and here. And I asked my husband, what are you seeing during that time? Like, can we pull this off? Like, can I go to Japan? Well, you're in Jackson. Oh, you're trying to go to Canada during that time with your clients. Okay. No. Okay. Let me flip this around. And then you're like checking flights and with your clients. And it's such a crazy puzzle. Part of me is like, what, how many more years of this can I do? But, it's like an intricate puzzle, and, Google Calendar helps a ton. And, you just like, put in your stuff and hope it doesn't overlap with the other stuff with your spouse, and you do your best. But my husband is really supportive, and he's the marketing director for XM, so he has some office work. So sometimes he'll sacrifice. So he'll be like, okay, I don't have to guide that day. Like I will take an office day. You go do the thing. And then we try to flip flop too. Like if he's like, I've got this bigger day, can you do something closer to home, or maybe you can do some ski instructing that day instead, or we flip flop a little. But the big trips, like the really big trips, he takes a huge load, and it's stressful. It's maybe not great for our marriage at times. Like these are hard times. I am out following my dream and my passion and my love, and I have like put this humongous weight on the rest of my family. And my kids, I'm like trying to give people a realistic picture, because while I have a ton of joy for my profession, there are downfalls to it too. And so it's like, relationship gets strained. My kids are like, Mom, are you really leaving us again? And that's like heartbreaking. So I'm trying to create a schedule where they don't say that often, where they're like, oh, okay, you're going somewhere. Cool. Call us, or okay, whatever, Mom, see you when you get back. That's what I'm aiming for versus, Mom, I can't believe you're leaving again. So when I hear, Mom, I can't believe you're leaving again, I'm like, I got to back off my schedule a little, and I need to find a better balance. So it's a work in progress always.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's definitely, even you don't have daughters, the scheduling is already a huge task. But now you have them, and also you have to collaborate with your husband to do this big scheduling with like a party of two. So definitely complex, which is something you like to do, something complex.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I have friends who are like, so when are you going to slow down?
Well,
I don't know.
yeah. I don't know. Do it when you are still enjoying it, right? So, yeah. It's difficult to do complex tasks, but it's also a privilege that we got to do complex tasks. Otherwise, life can be pretty boring, I think.
I agree. And like guiding sort of begs you to continually evolve. I think it does, or I think it lends itself to professional development, to challenging yourself, to like continually learning, because the more you do, the better you are at your job, and the better you are at your job, the more enjoyable it is. So it lends itself to this like professional, this high professional standard, and I love striving for it. I love trying to be the best that I can be, and there's always something else I can gain.
Yeah, and it's great that you're doing this, because a lot of women might be just like, oh, I can't have kids. It's going to be difficult, but it's possible.
It is possible. It's a bumpy road, but very, very rewarding. And yeah, I think anyone can do it that wants to. There's no doubt it's a lot of work, and having children is a lot of work. But then adding it to a guiding profession, which is a lot of work, really doubles the load, triples. Maybe it's exponential actually.
Yeah.
But worth it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't trade my children for anything, and I wouldn't trade my profession for anything. I love what I do. I love my community. I love my children. For me, it was the right thing.
And I like that you said that this profession kind of force you or nudge you to keep evolving. And a lot of time I think that even you're working for a guide service, you should treat it as like your own business. And in a way, you actually do have your own business. So Sky Diva, so by the name, is target to women, right?
It is, yeah. And it's Ski Divas. And it's
sorry, Ski Diva.
It's totally fun. But it's rooted in, it started with women's ski camps. So in 2006, I was skiing with Doug and Emily Coombs in La Grave, and I actually helped them run a women's camp for the first time that year in La Grave. And we were kind of starting to create a partnership. Like, you could come and help with our women's camps, and you continue to get your guide certification, and we have a thing going, And so I went that year. I was there with them in February and right into early March. Then I came home to Jackson, and then I went to Alaska. And in Alaska, in early April that year, I got a call saying Doug Coombs had passed away in an accident that day. And I was just like, I kind of shattered. Like, foot one, he was like a huge mentor for me. And I had this business plan with them, and it just like all fell apart. And I didn't really know what to do. I felt a little lost too, because Doug Coombs had like been a huge part of why I was moving into the guiding profession. And so I let things settle a little, the grief kind of settle out a little, and ultimately reached out to Emily, or maybe she reached out to me. I can't remember the exact order, but we started talking, and she said, look, Jess, you should keep running your camps. Like, you should keep a women's camp going. She's like, I'm done with the, Doug Coombs steep camps because it's too much grief. But she's like, you should keep going with it. Like, you should make it happen. So I was like, okay, what does that even look like? Like, I wasn't really planning on running my own business. I was just going to sort of do a business venture with them. And now I'm like looking at like a whole business venture. And so I did a little research and kind of market research and realized like there just weren't that many people doing women's ski camps. And there weren't that many women in places like Le Grave or Alaska. I'm like, well, that seems like a niche that I should fill. So I kind of, put together a business plan and got a website going and just threw out a couple camps in the mix. So the first year I was operating was 2007. And I did a camp in Le Grave, a camp in Jackson Hole, or 2 camps in Jackson Hole. So I did like a steep skiing camp in Le Grave. I did like a women's ski camp in Jackson, and then it was called Stretch the Limits. And then I did like a more ski mountaineering camp version just after that. And that was my first year, and it seemed really popular. Like, I didn't have a ton of clientele that first year, but just enough that I was like, oh, okay, if I can get this many people on my first year of business, I'm guessing this is a business I can continue with. So ultimately, it started with just women's ski camps and has fully expanded into the business where I process most of my clientele. I do a lot of private work at this point, so I'll build trips for my clientele in various places in the world. I'm a travel agent. I put together extensive itineraries, and I'm guiding most of it. Yeah, I go all over the world, and it is at this point co-ed. I still run women specific or women identifying clinics, but it's definitely expanded. So the Ski Divas, we're a very inclusive diva. We bring in the other genders of all kinds. As long as they identify as diva, then they're
okay. As long as they identify as diva, great.
Diva being like, I'm strong, I've got attitude, and I can use my voice. And if you can do that, you can come in.
What did those initial 2 ski camp look like? Like, what's in the curriculum? Yeah,
so Le Grave, I pretty much used the footprint that I had created with Doug and Emily. And so that's a much higher end skier. You needed to have skied a lot of steep terrain. You had to be comfortable in that terrain. You had to be comfortable getting lowered into some run and rappelling. And so I only had 3 clients that first year, but they were all great. And even Le Grave was like the ski area. They were like, when did you start doing this? We're very interested in this. We never get women here. Like, they instantly noticed. Even just 3 clients and myself, a group of 4 women doing the thing, they were like very interested. So I actually teamed up with like the Le Grave marketing team to work on getting more women into the sport and into that place. So that was very steep skiing oriented. We were like rappelling into lines, lowering into lines, into and out of lines, steep skiing. And then the Jackson Hole camp that I was running was a bit more of a feeder camp. Like, that was like, if you want to go to Le Grave, do this camp first, or if you want to build your skills over time, come to this camp. So it was inbounds. Le Grave was also like backcountry, sort of a whole mix. But the Jackson Hole one was like inbounds. We were really focused on skiing technique, working towards proficiency in steep skiing. If people wanted to learn how to jump cliffs, they could do that. But we didn't do like any technical stuff like rappelling or anything with harnesses. Like it was skiing oriented for that Jackson Hole camp.
That's interesting. So it sounds like that these two camps, especially the LeGras ones, it's not entry level at all. Not
No,
at all. And
no.
it's a little bit different because I'm involved in like, people ask me to do like women climbing courses, right? And then I think most of them are entry level courses, even though I believe that advanced courses, there should be takers. But so back then, it seems like, I'm not quite sure about the population, the distribution, gender distribution in skiing. Were they not many women? No.
Not in that kind of ski venue. Like ski alpinism and like high level alpine skiing and technical skiing and like ski mountaineering, there really were not that many women doing it. It was
I see.
very much a male dominated thing. I mean, going to Europe, like I just simply wouldn't see any other women in those areas. But I knew really amazing women skiers, and I'm like, there are capable women. I just don't think they've been given the invitation or the space to learn about. Maybe the limiting factor was that they didn't know how to rappel, or maybe the limiting factor maybe it was like, I am too nervous to navigate to that terrain. Like I just need help doing that, or whatever it was. Like there just weren't that many women who had been invited into the space. So.
Interesting. So you were not seeing that many women when you were out doing a little bit more technical skiing, like or more difficult steep skiing or whatever. However, you and Doug, I guess, and Emily recognize that there's probably a market for this.
Yes. Yeah. And a niche market, but a market nonetheless, and no one else was really doing it. So it was kind of a no-brainer. It was like, even if we don't get a ton of business, like there is a market.
Huh. Interesting. I wonder whether people not jumping into it because they think they are not gonna feel the course. But because it's just like, would there be those people? But then it seems like your approach is like, all right, we'll try this.
Yeah, I mean, that was how we approached it. We were like, let's try it and see how it goes. And but there were interested women. I will say though, skiing demographics have changed a little. I mean, we have one thing going. There's like financial barriers, right? So even just to get good enough to ski the kinds of lines that I'm offering in these camps, like there's years of commitment to skiing, right? And that alone is like however much money, insane amount. Unless you have like ins, like you work for a skier, you get a free pass and you have access to training and stuff like that. But there are ways to do it if you're not making a ton of money, but it's hard. You really have to like work the system and keep trying at it. So you have a financial barrier, and then those that can afford skiing tend to ski like holidays, and they have like a second home near a ski area, or so they're not necessarily looking for like that kind of experience. And then you get to the folks that maybe like are starting to get that ski experience, but maybe they can't afford a camp. So it is a niche market of folks that like have the money to pay for a camp, that have put enough time into skiing that they can enjoy being in that kind of camp and improve in that way, and are there for that kind of skiing. So it is niche.
Right. It is. But then you were saying that, okay, after the first year, you were actually keep expanding.
Yes. So there were like, I would say, so the first year I had like 3 more years of expansion. Like the camp got bigger. I was hiring local guides in LeGras. I was hiring men because there were no other women at the time. But it was fine. They were amazing people, and they were very sensitive to my camp. Like I would kind of lay down like, hey, this is special, like what we're doing
So I
here.
bet
So,
they are divas too.
yeah, they're totally on the Diva team. But so it expanded. But then what started happening is Le Grave had sort of this like series of years of drought, warm weather, and the ski conditions were just horrendous. So for like 3 years in a row, and I even tried like shifting the camp dates to try and accommodate for maybe it was better weather this time of year, and I just was striking out, and it was almost too dangerous because that type of skiing, if it's not soft and in good condition, it's slide for life death. Like it's like really terrifying. So it's time to go ice climbing at that point. But so I struggled my third year, especially like the third year of having sort of marginal conditions. I was like, okay, now this isn't working. And, folks are coming here, committing a lot of their time and money, and the conditions aren't quite right for this camp. So then I shifted away from it. So I did like 4 years of the Le Grave camp pretty seriously. And then I started focusing more in North America because we just get more consistent snow. Like we have better conditions overall. You can rely on the snowpack a bit more. And so now I've shifted more to like the Tetons in Canada. And I've been doing sail and ski trips in the Arctic. And I'm just like picking venues that no matter what have somewhat of a product, even if it's like marginal conditions. And that's been my shift from the European side of things. That being said, I'll still go back to Europe, and I have private clients here and there that want to go, but it's different now. I'm not running the camps like I used to there because of the conditions. It's just not consistent enough.
Right.
This is the big difference between rock climbing and skiing, right? Rock climbing, you're like, cool, this is a classic climb. Let's go try it. Like it's okay. Maybe it rained in Red Rocks, you can't climb it, but like generally speaking, you're like, yes, it's dry today. Let's go climbing. It's the same route that someone else got to climb 2 weeks ago, etc. But in skiing, 2 weeks ago might have been entirely different than the day I'm skiing today. And so you're definitely relying on, you're hoping that the conditions for your camps work out. And climate change, our environment right now, like it is nearly impossible to predict weather in some of these places. And so these big committed camps like in Le Grave, I've backed away from a little bit because of that. So now I've kind of latched on to the more consistent snowpacks.
I see. And that's why I jokingly tell people that people should just do rock climbing because you can probably battle with the climate change. Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why rock climbing feels more accessible, and not alone. Like, no, an avalanche isn't going to kill me. Rockfall could kill me, but like, no avalanches. I don't have to predict the avalanche hazard. Like, I can just know that this rock is mostly solid, with some exceptions. But like, it's not a changing medium. It's not changing from morning to the afternoon. Like, mostly, I can rely on the medium.
Yes, I would say so too. Rock climbing is just definitely. It might be hard, but it feels safer in a way.
Yeah. I beg to differ as a skier.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. So how long have you been running Ski Divas?
So 2007 was the founding year. And
2007. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And every
wow,
year
then
since.
It has been a while. Now it's 2024.
I know.
It's still going strong. Yeah.
Still going. So my formula is I don't ever, well, maybe someday I'll get bigger, but I definitely run like niche trips. I have decided to specialize in low numbers. So like the biggest ski camps I'll run are like 12 to 14 people max, like no more. That's big for me. I really like
how many guys should be there then? 12 to 14.
So 12 to 14, I'll have like, it depends on where we are and what we're doing. If we're in the backcountry, max ratio of 4 to 1, 4 clients to a guide. If we're in the front country, I can do up to 5 people per instructor or guide. if I'm doing ski mountaineering or really steep skiing, like Le Grave, 2-to-1, so low ratios. If I'm like doing sail and ski work, generally speaking, it's like 4-to-1 ratio. Canada, I usually try to stay 4 or 5-to-1 max. But the more technical I go, the lower the ratio goes. So if we're working with ropes and we're committed to a rope system at any point, I try to stay to 2-to-1.
Right. Yeah. But in a sense, compare rock climbing and skiing, I think skiing has a higher financial burden, I feel, barrier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, climbing gear, the most basic level, if I just get a pair of shoes, I can go bouldering, right?
Right.
But okay, now I want to climb on a rope, so now I need a harness and a rope. And if I can't set up a top rope, now I'm going to need some draws and gree. And so there's a chunk to like that first bit. It's not crazy, but that chunk is probably equal to one of the pieces of gear you need for skiing, like your pair of boots. And now you need skis, and now you need bindings and skins, and you need a backpack, and you need a beacon, a shovel, a probe. You need lots of layers. You need either a guide or a lot of knowledge about where you're headed, or a very, very strong background in avalanche safety. So if you don't have that, now you need to take an Avi course. You might need to take some ski lessons. You might just need to spend 4 or 5 years skiing at a resort to get enough volume to go and ski like in the backcountry like you want to. How much does a pass cost per year? Like, it adds up so fast. Huge financial barriers. This is a problem for the ski industry because while they have probably some of the more, they have more market share in the most like 1% elite rich in America, right? And actually in the world, if you think about skiing, but especially America, where skiing is extremely expensive. They've got a hold on that market share, and those people can pay quite a bit of money for skiing. But we want to talk about the rest of the population. Most people cannot afford skiing. And so what is the result? The result is numbers in skiing are dropping yearly right now. And skiers are like, we need to do something about this. There needs to be entry points. There needs to be, whether it's sliding scale or ways to incentivize working for resorts so that you can have a pass, and because you usually get a free pass when you work for a resort. Or maybe it's just reinvigorating like the school system. So a lot of schools in mountain towns will have like free ski days during the winter for different grades at different times and lessons, like reinvigorate those programs. And some of those programs are still going on, but there has to be entry point, and there has to be some financial incentive to allow folks from different financial tiers to enjoy the sport, because once people are hooked, once they love the sport, they're going to make it work, and that will help the industry in the long run. But the current trend is like cater more and more and more to this like elite 1%, but we will lose our sport if we're not careful, because you can only take it to that point for so long until like either those generations fall out or the love for skiing wasn't passed on to those generations within the elite wealth. And now what do you have? Like, who's left? So if we don't keep like spreading the love of this sport to the next generation of all walks of life, then the sport of skiing will die. And in Europe, it's interesting because it's so much more ingrained in their culture, like in many, many towns, because it's so mountainous in so many parts of Europe. Many, many mountain towns, skiing was just part, like free skiing for little kids, cheap skiing for adults. Maybe it's just a rope tow, maybe it's a simple chair, maybe it's a tram, but like accessible. Everyone does it, whether you're good at it or not, just everyone goes skiing. They have like tiny ski areas for families, they have big, scary, big things for people who want to go big, but there's like something for everybody. And that's where America is kind of, like many of our little mom and pop ski areas that are struggling to stay alive are what we need still to get more of the masses out to the sport of skiing.
That's an interesting point, because originally when we talk about inclusion, say, right, we talk about financial barrier, I was just like, my thought process is always just like, oh, okay, in climbing, right? I just like, oh, climbing is for everybody. Of course, everybody should be welcome. And then I'll try my best. But then I never thought in the way that you would describe, just like, well, if we don't get people interested, then this sport will die. Which is serious.
I think I am serious because I can already see certain parts of our population don't have access at all. And then, maybe there's increased access for certain parts of our population, but those generations aren't guaranteed to pass that on. Essentially, it's like we need people to fall in love with the sport, to remember that that's something they want to be doing and have connection to mountains in that way in order for it to continue on.
And I totally agree with you. Like once people are hooked, and they will make it happen. But then if they don't have access to it, then there's no way, they don't even know the sport. What do we even mention about getting hooked? And exactly. Yeah, that's like a new perspective about like the importance of inclusion. I like it.
Yeah, it's true though. And so, which brings me, and maybe you're already going here, but I'm going to say that this brings me to like sort of why I started this ski camp. So in COVID, there was a lot of social unrest, a lot of conversations around race and racism and like really where are we today in America? You couldn't help but pay attention to what was going on. COVID put us all at home. Like you had time to contemplate. A lot of my guiding was shut down because like public land was shut down. And so I was like, well, what's my next step? And I was like, I am missing this piece. I am missing giving back to like communities and populations and demographics that are not getting the opportunity to ski. And that's what I want to do. So I started this Biwalk ski camp. It's literally called Ski Diva's Biwalk ski camp. I know I should be more creative, but that is what it is. And it's like, I decided like I'm going to find the funding, and as long as I can get it, as long as I can get the funding, I am going to run this camp. I like volunteer all my time to make it happen. And I am going to bring skiing to those that don't have the opportunity to do it in the first place, to those that have historically been sort of shunned from the space, to those that have been in the space but have felt unwelcome or unwanted. And I really, really want our native populations, especially in this region, like the Wind River Reservation has several tribes living over there that are literally like an hour and a half away from Jackson, Wyoming, and they've never skied before. The Tetons, or Tiwanaut Range is the native name for the Tetons, Tiwanaut, which means like mountains with many pinnacles or mountains with many points. They have historically hunted and gathered here. They have been looking at these mountains, hiking into them for hundreds and hundreds of years. And meanwhile, we're over here like recreating and skiing on these mountains. And I'm like, they should have access to this too. They should, even though it's maybe a foreign way to travel on these mountains, their footprints and their time on these mountains has been first. So I've been very, very proactive to reach out to the native tribes in the region to join my ski camp. It's hard because those relationships haven't fully been mended, and a lot of those relationships we haven't built trust yet. That's part of what I'm doing, is like, let's build some trust and bring you back to this land, and let's do it via skiing so you can learn how to ski, because you should be skiing too, because you'll love it. And so that's part of it. So this is my 5th year I'll be running it, and I'll have some Navajo women from down south. I'll have some of the Shoshone and Arapaho tribe members coming over from the Wind River Reservation, and then other women from all walks of life who have historically been kind of marginalized in this space. So it's a really cool thing. It's like my way of giving back, and it feels so good to do it because I've been in this profession for so long. I have the means, I have the connections, and it just makes sense to do it, and I love it.
Wow, it's great. Yeah. And what would be your reactions? I saw even me, I have this bias, people talk about skiing, right? So I was just like, well, I don't have the money. I mean, of course, I have projects that I really go climbing, but but then I was just like, because in the past when I learned skiing, I was just a student, and I have to actually at first I have to get a car, and I have to drive to the resort, and then I'm like afraid because I didn't grow up in snow country, and driving in winter time on those roads is scary, and then. And I had to buy ski, just like all you say. I rented, and I just like, if I need to come in, I need to buy the equipment. And then I bought a season pass. And so then it's just like you said, snowball just add up really fast. And then eventually I just like, wow, climbing, I can at least be a dirtbag. And then we joke around and say, how come we are dirtbag and those are ski bums? Even though it's still kind of similar concept. Is there some way that, other than, you volunteer your time, provide this type of camp, any other way is like, at least it can change people's impression. It's like skiing is really not that inaccessible.
Right. And I think, to be fair, skiing is really not that accessible. but yeah, we're trying to change that. And there are other people aware of this issue. And so I don't know if you know Annette Diggs. She is the founder of Edge Outdoors. They're Pacific Northwest based, or originally Pacific Northwest based, Seattle region nonprofit. And Annette is Black. She is a ski instructor. She actually came to my very first inaugural camp. She was one of the scholarship winners. An amazing woman. She now coaches for my camp. She is running these programs on a much higher frequency than me. They're a little less involved. Like my camp is like, lodging and airfare and coaching and all your gear and dinners, and that's very, very involved. But she's running like weekend programs, like up at Snoqualmie Pass and Stevens and sort of the more accessible areas out of the greater Seattle area that are relatively simple, or even sometimes just half days, pretty low cost or no cost to go join. There are buses that run to these and shuttles that run to these resorts. You don't have to get in a car and drive in the really scary roads. And she's created so it's like every weekend or every week, and it's like consistent. And I'm watching her programs, and I think she of anyone is the most has had the most success making a consistent offering. And she has various sponsors. The ski resorts are helping back it. Like she's pumping, sponsorship dollars and donations into the mix, but she's keeping it consistent. And then from those programs, she's identifying people who are maybe like at a crossroads in their careers or not sure what to do with their lives, where they really find a passion in skiing. And then she's taking them and training them as ski instructors and snowboard instructors. I know, it's so cool. So she's been like putting them through ski instructor training, and then she's helping them get hired on by the resorts. Once you get hired on by a resort to work at a resort, now let's face it, it's not the highest pay in the world, but the perks are pretty good. So you get a free pass. Generally speaking, you get free or very, very reduced gear rentals. If you want to buy gear, it's usually at a really big discount, like a pro price. You sometimes get fed. You get free lessons. There are all these like perks. So if you're like really like interested in pursuing that career, then you can actually gain a ton of knowledge and experience by just signing on as an employee. So that's how she's tackling it. And it's cool. It seems to be working. And she's one of my coaches for the Ski Divas Biwak camp. And I'm always like gleaning new ideas from her, but my camp is so expensive. Like, first of all, Jackson Hole, I think there was some New York Times article recently that's like still the most wealthy county in America. I'm like, great, just what I need. But I'm a mountain guide. What am I gonna do here? But so mine is like notably like I'm inserting us into like the most wealthy county, but in the greater Seattle area, I think she just has a little more to work with and more population, and she can have an effect on more people. And she's the most sustainable work I've seen so far. And I've seen like her program go from like 12 women to like hundreds and hundreds of women. And they're consistently coming back, and some are moving into the profession. And so I think that her approach has been the most sustainable. But there's definitely like the elephant in the room is, ski areas are expensive to run. Ski areas are profit-based businesses, and they're motivated to make money, and they rarely give out free anything. So it's like, can we find a balance or a certain percentage of ticket sales and gear rentals that is dedicated to more of a sliding scale system, where that you're going to have a feeder system of more skiers coming to the mix, even if they're not making you the top dollar, they're keeping the sport alive, and it's allowing more access and ultimately generations of people that love skiing, which will ultimately only be a good thing for skiing. And I think that's where we have to go with it. I'm not in the business of owning a ski area, but I recognize like the difficulty of it and why it's so hard to make profits and why they're so focused on profits. But if you don't have people to ski, you don't have a sport. So
right. So definitely, come up with some win-win situation, hopefully. And yeah.
But even, like Jackson Hole is, they support my camp. They support a couple initiatives with, there's a pretty large Latino and Latina population in Jackson, Wyoming. They're supporting those kids to get into skiing, and there's another, there's like the Fort Hall reservation that's nearby. They've been bringing those kids over on a yearly basis every weekend. Like, they are putting some effort into this, but like for greater sustainability, we're probably going to need bigger efforts.
Yeah. But you know what? I see like hope from you that you start the thing, and then you have this woman. Sorry, what's her name again?
Annette Diggs.
Annette. Okay. And so she started this thing in Seattle area, and then things are pretty sustainable, and then inspire a lot of people, and then the program grows. So, well, this type of thing takes time, right? If we keep like thinking about it and doing things, then it's just hopefully it's gonna go to the good direction. Yeah.
It seems to me that it will. If things continue forward and people are motivated that are helping with funding, then it will ultimately help.
Awesome. Ooh, wow. And then also another thing I want to ask you is about your filming thing. You mentioned about like some film project, and then I saw some links on your website about this Greenland thing, and also this link on your Instagram about this Teton Valley mom and
oh yes,
yes, that one's cool. And then the Greenland one's cool. I have to say that about Greenland, I have no idea about skiing, because I always, I'm a climber, so I always know about the big wall climbing in Greenland. So how did that all start in the Greenland? Seems like it was your idea, kind of.
Yeah, so Greenland came about because I was up in the Arctic. I was working in Svalbard, which is an archipelago of islands, like way north up it's in the Arctic Circle. It's sort of one of the last land masses before the polar ice. And there's sort of like sort of a rare oscillation of ocean circulation that allows some warmer water to be up there, even though it's way the heck up there on our globe. And so I started doing some like Arctic ski and sail stuff there. It actually started with a film project. I was invited to come guide for a film project. I met the captain of the boat that we were on. We hit it off. We were like, ooh, we should do this as a thing together. So we started doing like ski camps or ski trips on this boat up in Svalbard. And we did 4 years of working up there. And then my captain was like, hey, I think I'm going to move on. I'm going to move somewhere else, which is very typical of sailboat captains. They like to move around. They're sailors. So my captain, Ben, he decided that he wanted to maybe take the boat to Iceland and then maybe do some stuff in Greenland the next couple of years. So in 2019, I met him in Greenland, And we did our first sail and ski trip. And we did this as like more of a kind of professional skier. I brought Rachel Burks and Joey Schuessler. Joey was a photographer and Rachel, a fellow athlete. And we just went and explored. Like it was like an exploratory mission. And just like the big walls, like we were seeing all the big walls, we were also like looking for the big ski lines. So we like kind of mapped out this whole region on the West Coast, like a big zone, and discovered a bunch of amazing climbing, like world class, absolutely stunning climbing and skiing. And we came back, we had like almost 3 weeks on this boat doing that trip. So it was a really big exploratory. And when we came back, I was like, I need to come back to this place. Like it is absolutely amazing, untouched. It has not been found yet, although it's starting to be, but it is, very, very remote. And it's just like right up my alley, like lots of exploring and thinking and, using all my skill sets to be in a place like that. And so 2019, we came back, and also that year, it was like one of the warmer years on record up there in Greenland. Like the ice sheet was really melting. So I was like, I want to come back and I want to document, more of what's going on in relation to climate change in Greenland. And also that's sort of my background in geology. I did work in climate change ultimately. And so we sort of had a tentative plan to come back for 2020, and then COVID hit. And then COVID really hit and like shut down things for 2 years. And in 2022, we got an opportunity to go back finally. And that's when we decided to make a movie, because I was like, well, now we will have seen almost 3 years of change potentially. Can we go back to some of these lines and glaciers that we were in and show what's going on? Like, can we see the physical change in the landscape over a 3-year period? So we dug deep, got the funding and the cinematographers and photographers, and went back and made a film. And that's Going Greenland is the name of it. And essentially to document, the changes that were happening. And ski, of course.
Yes.
It's a ski film, and it's about not only skiing, but it's like our connection to the place, why it's so special, yes. and then why climate change is such an issue, why it's such a big thing for a place like that. So,
and then you have footage you spending like 3 years time, yeah?
Yes. Yeah. So I was there. I've been there the last few years. I'm going back again this coming May. And then the boat that I've been working with, so I've been working with 2 different boats, but the one that I did the movie with, unfortunately, this fall had a really bad accident. It was moored outside of Nuuk, Greenland on the West Coast. And like a hurricane gale force wind came through, ripped the whole mooring buoy off its thing, and the boat went crashing into the shore. So that boat is currently, they're doing like a fundraiser right now at the Merrimatrice Association for the canoe, and they're selling art because the captain's an artist. So they're selling art to try to get the boat back online. So that boat is out of commission right now. And then this other boat that I work with, Skydancer, this is their last season in Greenland, and they're moving on. So it's like this fleeting adventure. I'm like, ooh, who wants to go with me? It might be the last one, It's like, it's kind of and that's the beauty of it too. It's like, this is not a permanent thing. There's no guarantee, but I have one going this year, so come with me.
And I'm curious, how much change did you see in the 3 years time? I mean, you typically 3 years is not a very long time to see geological change, right? Or but if you did see some change, it's kind of scary too.
Exactly. Well, so what was interesting is in 2019 when we were there, things were melting at a crazy rate. Like we were mostly skiing like corn snow, which is sort of this like warmer springtime snow, and all these like glacial rivers and moulins and just melting everywhere. Like we never carried water in our packs. We would just like fill up at various places. I mean, it was just everywhere was melting. and we could see the rate of melt. And this is just in like a 3-week period. And then I'm like, okay, now 3 years have gone by, and I was like, there's the polar station at the top height of Greenland, which is at like 10,200 feet or something. It's like the thickest part of the ice, a little further north than where I go skiing. And the temperatures they'd been recording there in those 2 years that we were gone were some of the higher temperatures on record. So I was like, it is possible that some of those glaciers that we used to approach up to lines or ice falls that we had to navigate to get through things have completely changed. I wasn't sure, but I had a theory. And I'd seen it in Alaska too. Like in Alaska, I can fly around in a helicopter and like literally from year to year see the change in these glaciers. So I was like, we're bound to see some changes. So we go back. The snowfall that year was actually higher than average for most years. So there was like a coating of snow over everything that was undeniably making it look quite snowy and fine, like no big deal. But where we really started to see the changes, but we would go to these anchor points where these big glaciers are coming into the ocean. And the glaciers where they used to be were like 300 or 400 feet back. Our anchor points were changing because of it. Like we were like, wait, we actually are anchoring like 200 or 300 feet in a different spot because the glacier's gone. And it was so crazy. It was so crazy. We saw it in like 4 different main anchorages. And then we were also seeing it in these ice falls. So some of the ice falls we had to navigate to get through and up to the tops of the mountains. Some of them were so cracked up. It was like, we can't even go through that anymore. And some had just simply like melted back and like it made it impassable. Like there was no more snow connection. It was like slick, polished, steep rock. And you're like, oh, we're not going there either. So it did change some things. Some areas admittedly looked pretty similar, but certain spots, especially the glaciers that came into the sea, were significantly different. And that was just 3 years. Like the rate of melt is like exponentially higher in these Arctic environments because they're so sensitive to climate change, to a shift in temperature.
So what do you mean by they are so sensitive to climate change?
So in other words, like if we feel a 1 degree, like an overall 1 degree shift, like warmer in Jackson, Wyoming, it might be a little drier for the summer. The snow might melt a little faster in the mountains. But in Greenland, where they have 80% of their landmass is covered in ice, and suddenly, that ice starts to run with rivers, and then it starts to expose some of the rock within the ice, and then that starts to melt it even faster. Just the rate of change, because of the nature of the snow and ice, is faster. Like once it starts melting, it doesn't stop melting. It's sort of a vicious cycle. Unless we could have a few years of like super high snowfall with colder temperatures in the summer months, where we start to build the snow and ice again. But right now that's not happening. It keeps getting warmer and warmer, and so it just keeps melting. The other thing that's happening in Greenland, which I was only vaguely aware of until I made this movie, and that is the land that is exposed along the edges of the ice cap of Greenland is mostly permafrost, which is, dirt and ice frozen. And that frozen dirt, when it melts slowly, provides water for plants. Water for the plants creates enough vegetation for the animals that roam the little bit of landmass that they have. So there's like this native ox-like creature and some other like foxes and different birds that rely on this vegetation. When the permafrost melts, the vegetation doesn't have a water source and the vegetation dies. Once the vegetation dies, it's essentially like desertification, and the animals can't live off the land anymore, and then they either die or go somewhere else, and they don't have really anywhere else to go because it's either an ice cap or the ocean. So it's sort of a vicious cycle there too. So the animals that many of the natives rely on in the summertime are starting to dwindle a little bit. There's also reindeer, because the vegetation isn't growing as well because some of this permafrost is melting and desertifying the land. So that's another piece of that, like warming. Could we see like a drastic change? Only a couple spots, like I said, with the big glaciers. Could we see like an overall trend? 100%. And the locals that we talked to were all feeling it too. They were like, yeah, these have been some of the warmest years we've ever had on record. It's changing our landscape. So I think while we have problems here in the lower 48, like we have cities that get too hot and it kills people, right? But their entire landscape is changing because of the heating. Like it's literally changing the nature of their country.
Yeah, I didn't realize Greenland it consists of, you said 80% of the ice. Wow. So if they're gone in the increasing rate, definitely I can't imagine the landscape changing. Huh. And all those things, right? The animal, I mean, it all kind of cascade, like chain reaction to all sorts of different things.
Totally.
Wow. And that's another saying I heard is like, guides usually see, because the guys spend a lot of time in the mountains, right? And then like say a local guide, they usually visit the same line over and over again. So they are like the first witness of like the climate change. Yeah. Because recently I've heard so much, even I don't go to Chamonix, but I heard a lot of stories about the conditions there. It's like very different. It's like a lot of risk, harder to navigate. Ooh.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know guides that used to guide in Europe and it stopped. They just say it's too hot, like too much rockfall. The glaciers are melting, rockfall ensuing, and it's too dangerous. So yeah. There's that. We got really serious really fast. But I mean, as a mountain guide who walks in the natural landscapes all the time, it's a thing. We better pay attention to it. Like we want a sustainable,
right.
Maybe beyond mountain guiding. Let's just talk about human population on Earth real quick. Like if we want to stick around, we may need to pay attention to this, right?
Right. I mean,
the Earth
definitely
can like spit us out. The Earth might just be like, I'm done with you all. Like I'm going to make it too hot. Y'all are out of here. Get out of here. I'm going to heal. Okay.
Yeah, definitely the chain reaction. We are not like, we are part of the chain for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing so many stories. I know we are not really talking about guiding, but I'm so glad that, I heard all these stories that you share. It's fascinating. It's like a different world.
That's the beauty of it, right? Like the guiding profession is diverse in the ways you can guide and what you can do and the experiences you can have. And I love that we got to meet in Vegas this fall, and I'm like, oh, that was like a connection that was meant to happen. And now we can like connect our paths, and now I have another piece, and I think it's amazing. It's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah, and I know that your guiding career is still going strong. Like, do you think like in the foresee, like I know that a lot of guys burn out, they might like change careers. And what do you think? You think that you still keep going for quite a few years? Right now, you don't have any plan for anything else?
Yeah, it's like part of me. So I see the progression sometimes. I see when guides' bodies start to fail, and like I don't want to get to that stage and be like, oh, bummer, I can't move the way I want to anymore, and I haven't created anything else for myself. I feel like it is such a piece of me. I don't want to leave the profession, and I'm trying to think of how I want to evolve gracefully as I age. Like right now, I feel like I'm in the pinnacle of my career. Like I'm not stopping. but I know it's coming. And I know that like at some point when I'm 75, 80 years old, I probably won't want to hike 10,000 feet underneath a Serac fall with like someone tied to me. Like I'll probably want to chill out and read a book and hang out with my grandchildren or something. So, I mean, I don't know actually, but I'm guessing. So like I, I can see that potentially my career path will evolve with how I'm feeling, and maybe I take on more of the softer side of my guiding where, right now I'm still sort of embracing sort of the hardcore side of it, but maybe I do take it into lower angle powder skiing for a while, or, you know, maybe I get to rock climb in the desert all winter long instead of being cold all winter. But I don't want to, I don't want to leave it. Like maybe I expand my business and I become more administrative and mentoring and allow other guys to work for me. Whatever it is, I don't want to fully leave it. I really love it. I like really love it. And it's such a huge part of me. It's such a huge part of my identity. I know that sounds dangerous, but it is part of me. It's like literally part of me. So I don't see myself fully leaving. I see myself evolving as I evolve in age and hoping that I can continue my connection to it and to the mountains.
I definitely see your passion in guiding, and I'm curious. Every person has different reason. And what's your favorite part of guiding?
There's sort of two parts to it. I think the first part is it gets me out into nature and keeps me in an environment that I really love. Like I'm not very good at a desk job for very long. Like I can do like a little bit and then I get antsy and I want to be out in nature. So it puts me in the environment that I love. And then the second piece is sharing an experience with someone that brings them so much inspiration and joy and like potentially life changing, right? And you see it in them and then you recognize it and you're like, oh wow, I just helped guide that experience and bring that to them. I'm not going to claim it all because they did it for themselves, but like that I was able to be part of that and help provide that is really special. Like these are life-changing experiences. I watch people get to the top of the Grand Teton and have like the most cathartic experience, and it shifts me too. I like feel it. And to be a part of those experiences, whether it's like they came through a challenge, they had an epiphany, they've overcome something, to be in that space with someone like that is very inspiring.
I like to ask some like bigger questions. Then I'm curious. So you love guiding this much. Say, would you wish or wish not that your kids become guides?
Wow. Yeah, that's a tough one. So I feel like lately, especially, and maybe it's just like the list is accumulating. I feel like I've lost a lot of friends lately. Friends, peers, guides, to their profession or in the environment that they spend the most time in the mountains. And every time it happens, it keeps crushing me. And then even more recently, in the last year, there's definitely been this awareness of my mortality, and in a way that I'm like, I would really like to not die in the mountains. That's actually a big goal of mine. Like, let me be like sitting on my porch or sleeping in my bed, but I really don't want to die in the mountains. And yet I keep putting myself in this risky place, because we know mountains are a risky place to be. But would I deny my children of that joy if they ended up loving that as much as I did, just because it's risky? I don't think so. I'd probably let them go. But I also just lost a dear, dear friend who's very young, Michael Gardner, who I was like, oh my God, he died so young. Like, this is so horrible. I couldn't even live with myself if I'd lost my children at that age. That's a tough question. It really is. But would I deny my children of their passion? If guiding became their passion, it'd be hard to deny them of it because it's what's fueled me for so long.
Yeah, thank you for answering. Sorry I asked you such a difficult question. Yeah.
It's actually been a prominent theme in my consideration of my profession lately. It's just my mortality, the risk that I put myself in when I choose to take on certain types of risk, how I manage it, and am I smart enough to continually be aware of when I'm either getting away with it or getting close to something that could take me out. Like, will I be able to see it? Can I avoid it? Or will I be too complacent, or am I in the environment too often to even be able to mitigate that, right? That's the question I'm asking myself. So maybe it's like time to start thinking about that evolution piece. Like maybe I'm now like, okay, so where's the softer side of this?
Yeah. And I totally understand. It's like it's hard. Yeah. I have friends dying on climbing and on guiding too. And then it's just kind of a reminder and heart blow for me, even I'm not in the mountains, but still, I mean, also outdoor climbing related activity has its risk. So, and then, yeah, and actually I don't have any other words. Yeah, it's hard.
It is hard. It's probably one of the harder things we have to grapple with. It's like our passion is also the thing that brings us some of the most grief at times. And our passion has a lot of risk involved. Granted, driving down the street, down the
Yes.
highway, has a ton of risk also, but
Yes, but I mean, we heard the argument all the time, and we use the argument all the time. But I personally don't have any friends die from car accident. But I do have friends die in climbing. So for me, it's kind of like a lot of time I just start to just like, can I really justify it by just telling people that you're driving? That's more risk. So for me, it's yeah. But in any rate, I think that. Even though it's a heavy topic, then I try to tell myself that I need to not ignore that. I can't just write it off, just say, okay, not think about it. But to recognize it and hope and try to make the best decision that I can make, I guess. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
I think that is really wise and a perspective I'm always trying to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
when I start to lose that, I hope my peers are like, hey, remember?
Yeah. But the thing is, I'm really excited because you left the whole conversation and then you certainly show a lot of passion in this profession. And I just, I love to borrow some of your energy because I just finished a busy month, November. I'm like super tired. I didn't do anything for 2 days. Typically, I would go climbing on my own. And I was like, I don't want to do anything. And then I started to ponder for myself, just like, oh, is this sustainable? Can I keep going? So, it's love to share your experience. Not saying that I would just say, oh, I'll keep going. It's not that simple, but just remind me of like, the passion and then the joy and then the love toward this line of work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it's bringing you joy, then there's no reason not to continue, in my opinion. But yeah, it comes with its challenges. There are some times where I'm so exhausted. Earlier you're asking, like, how do you balance the family part? Like, there are times where I come home, I have nothing left for my family. I'm like, I have talked all day. I am so exhausted. But usually, like, I recognize that. I'm like, okay, I might need a few more days off, like, or I need to make more time for my family or whatever it is. It's like, usually that's the sign. I'm like, okay, that's probably enough. I need a little break.
Then I have a question. Then, do you think you are capable of identify early signs of burnout?
I think I tend to my nature is to push. Like I like challenges. I push, and so often I do realize I'm getting burned out too late, or I push through it. but then I also know that is when we're most at risk. Like when you're exhausted, you're not thinking as clearly. Your decision making's maybe compromised because of it, or you're compromising your family because of it, or whatever. I do, yeah. I often recognize that too late, but then that sort of sets me into a pattern of like, okay, time to stay more aware here. Let's not do that again for a little while. And I often find I can keep myself in check for a while after something like that's happened. But I tend to push it a little. I do. I'm fine. And then when I'm not fine, I realize it. And then I try to avoid that for a while. Like find the balance of my rest days and my family time, my time off. And then I get all excited about something and, deeply involved in some massive trip I'm setting up. And then I pushed it too far and start over.
Nice. Whew. So when is your next trip?
So I have a little time in the Tetons, which is great. Some local clients, some Christmas clients. My next trip is to Japan. I am leaving on January 10th. And then, so that'll be fun. I'm excited for that. And then from there, I go to Canada, or I come back briefly. Jackson and I have a hut trip in Canada with a group of women that I've been working with for a long time. It's really amazing. Like, it's sort of an annual trip. There'll be an Icefall Lodge for that one, which is kind of on the western slope of the Canadian Rockies. So it gets a lot of snow, but it's like that huge terrain, like out of like Banff Provincial Park, really beautiful. And then I have like all of February in the Tetons, which is great. Can't wait. Bit of March in the Tetons, and then Alaska for March and April, and then May I have Greenland.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
You got it all planned out. You have this next half year at least. Maybe I didn't stop you, you keep going. June I'll be here, and July I'll be here.
And I'll be in Vegas in the fall. No. But no, I need to plan because my family,
Right.
and also these big trips take planning. For people to come on board, they need time to plan for themselves. So it helps me to have it laid out. The key is like keeping, like in my calendar, I like put in bold letters with like bright red off, like that I don't change that status on my calendar. That those off days are like gold. I need to hold those in there.
Nice. Yeah. So best of luck of all your trips. And thank you so much for coming on this show. Yeah, I had so much fun.
Oh, thank you, Ting Ting. Thank you so much. Okay. Now my goal is to get you to come skiing with me.
I was into skiing for quite a few years when I went sometime in my 20s something. Nice. And then I got so into it. I took avalanche courses. I learned, I have a probe, I have beacon, I have shovel, and I have everything. I learned how to telemark. And then I went to this backcountry trip and I sucked because that was my first time ski powder. Because
yes.
I learned skiing in the East Coast, so it's all like icy, crusty,
Yes.
And then I have no idea how to ski powder. And then I fell, I couldn't get up, and I was the last in the group. So there's two instructors. So one instructor has to basically keep an eye on me, and so she was always behind the whole group. And then my ego got this huge.
Okay, you are not the only one to have this experience, by the way. I meet a lot of people who are like really good skiers inbounds with like firmer snout, but as soon as they do powder, they're like, oh, I don't know. They feel like they're out of control. Powder, the beauty of powder is that it slows you down. Like it actually drags on you a little bit. So you don't have to try as hard. You can actually kind of let it go. But this is a very difficult like idea.
Let it go. Yes.
Yeah, you're like, so what you're saying is just go straight. And I'm saying yes, pretty much, but in a nutshell. But to get the trust to even feel that initially is a process. I have like a powder progression for people. We start in very, very flat powder, right? But
yes.
But the key is like letting the powder help you do the work in a way. It's like,
Yeah, but that was not the only problem at that time because I was also skiing in Vermont, so there were a lot of trees.
well, that's hard. That's different. That's a little harder because now you have something you absolutely have to avoid. And when I say let it go and you're trying to avoid a tree, that's like a bad combination. So, so what you need is like a beautiful, like 30-degree, 27 to 30-degree slope, open, fresh powder, and we'll learn how to really do the powder.
Okay.
That would you can find the rhythm with it and realize like, oh, this is how my skis interact with this, like I push here or balance out here, like this is when my skis plane out, or you start to understand how the powder reacts to your skis, and that's when it comes together. But it's different. It's a different technique for sure.
I see. Yeah, so maybe that trip combined too many new elements all at once, and then I was just frustrated.
Understandable. You are not alone.
So I decided to sell my skis, and then I commit to rock climbing.
Fair enough. Okay. We'll make a deal. I'll come rock climbing and do some of the scary climbing with you, and then you can come skiing with me.
I don't know about not even nowadays. I don't do scary climbing.
Yeah, but
definitely,
I'm a scared climber, so there we go.
Definitely, we can trade. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you are a climber. I mean, you are doing your rock guide exam. It's not like you're.
I know I'm not a bad climber, but I understand the fear. Like, yes, rock climbing is relatively straightforward in a way, but like it's still scary. Like, I get it. I get it, and it's fear can be debilitating. So yeah.
Great. I mean, if anything that I can show you on climbing, I would trade.
Sounds like a deal. I'm excited.